America just lost control of its most valuable resource, not oil, not technology, not even military power, water. And the country that knows this better than anyone? Canada. I'm going to show you why the quiet crisis unfolding in the American Southwest represents the most significant geopolitical shift of the 21st century, because what's happening to Lake Mead, the Colorado River, and millions of American communities isn't just an environmental story, it's a power story. Before you think this is just another climate change documentary, let me tell you what I discovered. There are 3 tipping points that brought us to this moment. The first one happened in 2024, and most people missed it. The second one is happening right now in courtrooms across the Southwest. But the third tipping point, that's the one that changes everything about America's relationship with its northern neighbor. Picture this. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, sits at its lowest level since it was filled in the 1930s. The white bathtub ring on the canyon walls tells a story that no politician wants to acknowledge. Each foot of exposed rock represents not just lost water, but lost power generation, lost agricultural capacity, and lost assumptions about American prosperity. The reservoir that once held enough water to cover Pennsylvania 1 foot deep now struggles to supply Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Southern California. The Colorado River, which carved the Grand Canyon over millions of years, is being sucked dry by 40 million people in just under a century. But here's what keeps me awake. This isn't a temporary drought. This is a structural realignment of how water flows through the American West. And unlike oil, which you can buy from other countries, water has geography. You either have it or you don't. The 20th century was defined by oil. Nations went to war over it. Alliances formed around it. But water is more fundamental than oil. You can live without oil. You cannot live without water. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. While America watches its reservoirs shrink, Canada sits on 20% of the world's fresh water. The Great Lakes alone contain enough water to cover the entire continental United States 10 feet deep. And for the first time in North American history, that geographical advantage is becoming a strategic lever. The story begins in 1922 with the Colorado River Compact. 7 states gathered to divide the river's water. They based their calculations on flow measurements from some of the wettest years in the river's recorded history. They assumed abundance would continue forever. They were catastrophically wrong. For a century, that compact governed water rights across the Southwest. Cities expanded, farms multiplied, and everyone assumed the water would keep flowing because a treaty said it should. But rivers don't read treaties, and the Colorado River has been sending a message for 20 years. The water you divided no longer exists. When hydrologists say Lake Mead might reach dead pool status, they're not being dramatic. Dead pool means the water level drops so low that it can no longer flow through the dam's outlets. No water for cities, no power generation, no irrigation for farms. Let me paint you 3 pictures, 3 lives shaped by a crisis most Americans don't yet understand. First, meet Maria, 3rd-generation farmer in Arizona. Her family has grown crops on the same land since 1960. Last year, her water allocation was cut by 40%. This year, it was cut again. She's not fighting climate change or government policy. She's fighting mathematics. There simply isn't enough water to go around, and someone has to lose. Second, meet James, casino worker in Las Vegas. He's lived in the city for 30 years, watched it grow from a desert town to a metropolis of 2.5 million people. Every day he drives past Lake Mead. Every day he sees the water line lower. His job depends on tourists who come for the spectacle of a city that shouldn't exist. But spectacles built on illusions eventually face reality. Third, meet Robert, river guide on the Colorado. He's been navigating these waters since 1985. He's watched rapids disappear as water levels dropped. He's watched beaches emerge where there used to be deep channels. Lately, he's been wondering if he's narrating the river's obituary. 3 people, 3 lives, 1 crisis that connects them all. And here's what none of them fully grasp yet. Their futures are no longer being decided in their state capitals or even in Washington. They're being shaped by decisions made in Ottawa. Canada didn't set out to become a water superpower. They simply maintained what geography gave them. While America drained its rivers to irrigate deserts and fill swimming pools in the driest regions on Earth, Canada protected its watersheds. While American politicians treated water as unlimited, Canadian policymakers treated it as a strategic asset to be preserved. And now, for the first time, that preservation is translating into geopolitical power. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, once a simple environmental protection treaty, has become something far more significant. It's a declaration that Canada will not export its water abundance to solve America's water scarcity. Think about what that means. For 80 years, America assumed it could always negotiate, always find a deal, always use economic pressure to access what it needed. But water changes the equation. Canada doesn't need American approval. They have what America needs, and America has nothing comparable to trade. This is the institutional correction I've been warning about. When great powers become volatile, smaller, stable powers gain influence, not through military conquest, not through economic warfare, through something far more subtle. They become indispensable by being dependable. Let me take you inside a meeting room in Phoenix. Water managers from 7 states, tribal representatives, federal officials. They're staring at projections that everyone knows are optimistic. Even in the best-case scenario, the Colorado River system cannot supply the water that existing legal agreements promise. Someone suggests buying water from farmers. Someone else suggests desalination plants. A third voice mentions Canada. The room gets quiet because everyone knows that conversation leads to a place American negotiators haven't had to go in generations, asking for help from a position of weakness rather than offering deals from a position of strength. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, Canadian water policy experts are having a very different conversation. They're not asking how to help America. They're asking how to ensure that Canadian water remains a Canadian asset. They're drafting frameworks that treat water not as a commodity to be traded, but as a sovereign resource to be protected. And here's the part that should worry every American policymaker. Canada is not doing this out of hostility. They're doing it out of prudence. They watched America's water crisis unfold. They ran the projections, and they concluded that if they opened the door to water exports now, there would be no way to close it later. 10 years from now, historians will look back at 2024 and 2025 as the years when water diplomacy replaced oil diplomacy as the defining feature of North American relations. 20 years from now, Canadian defense companies will be integrated into European supply chains so deeply that separating them would be impossible. But right now, in 2025, most Americans still think of water as something that comes out of a tap. They haven't yet internalized that the tap is connected to systems under stress, to reservoirs running dry, to rivers that no longer reach the sea. So here's the third tipping point. The one I promised would change everything. The United States Supreme Court is currently hearing a case that will determine whether states can enforce water rights agreements written a century ago, or whether those agreements must be renegotiated based on current reality. The decision, expected in 2025, will either lock America into a system designed for a wetter climate or force a complete reimagining of water allocation across the West. But here's what makes this truly pivotal. Whatever the court decides, it cannot create more water. It can only decide who loses access to water that no longer exists in the quantities promised. And that decision will determine which states thrive, which states struggle, and which states begin the painful process of depopulation. This isn't just about water. It's about the American assumption that problems can always be solved with enough technology, enough money, or enough political will. Water is teaching us a different lesson. Some problems cannot be solved. They can only be adapted to. As Lake Mead fails, attention turns to the Great Lakes. As the Colorado River dries up, pressure builds to tap into the Mississippi. And as American needs grow more desperate, the temptation to treat Canadian water as a North American resource rather than a Canadian resource will intensify. But Canada isn't the quiet neighbor anymore. They watched America's coffee trade vanish to predictability concerns. They absorbed lessons from USMCA threats. And now they're applying those lessons to water policy, building legal